The day dawned cloudy, the sky covered by gray clouds that seemed to reflect Ethan's emotional state. He woke up in a hospital bed, the cold white light from the overhead fluorescents making his eyes slowly adjust to reality. The smell of disinfectant and the feeling of pulsing pain in his body were a constant reminder of the accident that almost cost him his life. With a tentative movement, he tried to stand up, but a wave of pain forced him back against the pillow. "Ethan, you need to calm down," said a nurse, entering the room with a worried look. "Your body is recovering, but it's too early to move much." He nodded, swallowing hard as the words tried to escape his mouth. He remembered the car rolling over, the shattered glass, and the deafening silence that enveloped him when everything stopped. What hurt most, however, was not the physical injury, but the feeling of abandonment that consumed him. Laura and Sophie, his wife and daughter, were gone, leaving him behind in a moment of despair. Thoughts raced through his mind as he tried to understand what had happened. "Why did they go?" he muttered, more to himself than to the nurse. "Sometimes people make difficult choices. We can't judge," she replied, looking away, as if the situation was more than she could handle. The nurse left, leaving Ethan alone with his dark thoughts. He wanted to understand. He wanted Laura to explain why she had decided to run away, why she had taken Sophie with her. A mix of anger and sadness was growing inside him, like a storm about to break. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in a different city, Laura stared at a framed photo of Ethan and Sophie. The portrait captured a happy moment where laughter and love were evident. But now, everything seemed distant and unreal. With shaking hands, she caressed the image, feeling a mixture of guilt and relief. There were aspects of her new life that made her happy, but the shadow of what she had left behind followed her like a ghost. "Mom, are you okay?" Sophie asked, her voice soft and worried. The 16-year-old, always sensitive, noticed her mother's expression. "I am, honey. I'm just thinking about things from the past," Laura replied, quickly putting the photo away, as if she were hiding a secret. "Do you think he's okay?" Sophie asked, the innocence in her eyes reflecting the pain of a child who didn't understand the complexity of adult decisions. Laura hesitated, her mind filled with memories about Ethan. "I think so, love. Sometimes people need space to heal." The words came out with a weight that made her uneasy. She knew it wasn't just space that Ethan needed, but a life without her. And as she tried to build a new life, a part of her felt lost, like she was living a lie. Days passed in the hospital, and Ethan faced each one with quiet determination. The pain began to subside, and with it, the feeling that he could start over. He couldn't forget Laura and Sophie, but maybe he could find a new purpose, a new identity. The idea of starting over took shape in his mind, a burning desire to no longer be the victim of his own story. "One day, I'll stand up and show them that I'm alive," he promised himself, feeling the strength building inside his chest. Laura, in turn, couldn't shake the feeling that her choices had consequences. Deep down, there was a restlessness, a question that haunted her. What had happened to Ethan? And, more importantly, what would she do when she found him again? The answers seemed beyond her reach, but life went on, and deep down, she knew that one day she would have to face the past. Ethan, now Adam, awakened to a new reality that stood before him like a blank slate, waiting to be filled. The pain of his past still pulsed inside him, but the determination to start over was stronger. He had moved to a small coastal town, where the waves of the sea seemed to wash away his memories, bringing with them the hope of a different future. The first thing Adam did was look for a job. He wanted to move away from the victim image he carried. After a few weeks of searching, he found a vacancy at a local restaurant, Mare Alta. The kitchen had become his refuge, a place where he could express his creativity through food and forget, at least for a few hours, the pain that had accompanied him for so long. On the day of the interview, upon entering the restaurant, you were greeted by an aroma of spices and warm smiles from the staff. "Do you have experience in the kitchen?" asked the manager, a woman with gray hair and piercing eyes. "Yes, I've worked at several places before. One of them was a bistro in a bigger city," Adam replied, trying to keep the nervousness in his voice. "Perfect. We need someone with drive. Will you start tomorrow?" She smiled, and Adam felt like finally something good was starting to happen in his life. The days passed, and Adam adapted to the new environment. He made friends among his coworkers, Lucas, an energetic young man who dreamed of opening his own restaurant, and Clara, a chef who shared valuable cooking tips with him. The laughter and relaxing moments in the kitchen became part of his new routine, and he felt reinvigorated. One day, while working the afternoon shift, Adam received an unexpected visitor. A woman with curly hair and a curious look entered the restaurant. It was an old childhood friend, Anna, who hadn't seen him since the accident. With a shy smile, she approached. "Adam, is that really you?" The disbelief in his voice was palpable. "Hi, Anna. Yes, it's me. It's been a difficult time, but I'm here, starting over." Adam smiled, feeling a rush of warmth as he relived childhood memories. "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry. You're really strong for getting through all of this," she said, admiring him. Adam shook his head, a mix of gratitude and sadness filling his chest. "Actually, I'm not that strong. I just learned to fight for what I want. And now, I want to live." Meanwhile, Laura and Sophie's life in the new city was not as full as it seemed. Laura, even surrounded by comfort, could not escape the guilt that tormented her. Looking at Sophie's photo at a school event reminded her of Ethan and the decision he had made. The voice of conscience echoed in his mind. "It was you who left him to die, and now he is alive." Sophie, in turn, missed her father. The stories Laura told about the past couldn't fill the void her absence left. One day, while at school, she overheard a group of her classmates talking about a new restaurant that had opened in town, Adam's Place. The name intrigued her, and a feeling of curiosity led her to ask, "Who is Adam?" She couldn't remember anyone with that name. "Oh, they say he's an incredible chef. Everyone talks about the place. You should go there," replied an excited friend. At that moment, Sophie felt an inexplicable impulse. Adam. The name echoed in his mind like a lost memory. An idea began to take shape. If he was back, maybe the past wasn't so far away. And with this new discovery, Laura and Sophie decided it was time to return to the city they had left behind. They needed answers, and Ethan's inheritance, now Adam, seemed to be the way to resolve the questions that still hung over their lives. Little did the two know that their reunion with Adam would reveal truths that would change everything again. Laura and Sophie stopped in front of what had been Ethan's home, now enveloped in sepulchral silence. The house, although still standing, showed signs of abandonment and neglect. The windows, mostly covered in dust, looked like eyes that watched the passage of time, while the peeling paint on the exterior walls reminded us of wounds that never healed. The memory of a warm and familiar past contrasted with the coldness of the present moment. "Are you ready for this?" Sophie asked, her voice an anxious whisper. Laura looked at her daughter, noticing the mix of emotions that lived in her eyes. Guilt and the need to justify her actions hung over her like a dark cloud. "I don't know if I ever will be," Laura replied, feeling the pressure in her chest increase. "But we need to do this. The inheritance is still ours, and we need the money." Sophie grimaced, as if a part of her wanted to disagree, but the need for financial stability compelled her to press on. "Let's go in. I just want to know what happened here." The two walked through the rusty gate and approached the front door. The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed like a warning. As soon as the door opened, a smell of mold and aged wood enveloped them, bringing back memories of the past. The walls were bare, without the paintings that used to adorn them, and the wooden floor creaked underfoot, as if protesting their presence. "It's strange being here again," Laura murmured, looking around. "It feels like time has stopped." "Ethan, Adam, he really didn't come back?" Sophie asked, hesitantly. The mention of his father brought up a mixture of longing and pain. He wasn't well when we left," Laura said, trying to protect herself from memories that tormented her. "But we can't think about that now. We need to find his diary. He must be here somewhere." While exploring the rooms, Laura and Sophie came across the living room, where the sofa was still covered with a white sheet. The room seemed frozen in a moment of limbo, and Laura couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. "I really thought it would be better for us," Her voice trailed off, and Sophie interrupted her. You abandoned him, Mother. How did you think he would feel? Sophie spoke, frustration showing in her words. I know I made a mistake, but this is not the time to discuss this now. Laura responded, the tension between them increasing. We need to focus on what matters. While rummaging through a dusty shelf, Laura found a small leather-bound notebook. Her heart skipped a beat. Here it is, she exclaimed, pulling him out in a hurry. It's his diary. Sophie approached, her eyes widening with curiosity and apprehension. Let's read. We need to understand what happened. Laura hesitated for a moment, but the need to understand what Ethan felt after her departure was overwhelming. She began flipping through the pages, and the carefully written words seemed to leap off the page, filled with pain and resilience. I'm trying to move on, but the pain is unbearable. With each passing day, I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. Laura and Sophie, you have no idea how much I love you and how much it hurts not to have you by my side. Sophie swallowed hard, her eyes welling up. He really loved us, he murmured, the reality of what they did starting to set in. Laura continued to read, each sentence in the diary becoming a thorn in her heart. The fight to get back on my feet is exhausting, but I know I need to find the strength within myself. One day, I hope you can forgive me. The last sentence echoed in Laura's mind like a distant echo. Forgive, she whispered, feeling the pressure of regret. What we did was unforgivable. Just then, the front door creaked, and they both turned around, their hearts pounding. Adam, now a strong and determined man, stood at the entrance, watching them with an expression that mixed anger and pain. The past had returned, and they were about to face the consequences of their actions. Adam? Laura finally said, her voice shaking. You are alive. Of course I am, he replied, his voice firm but with a hint of bitterness. And I'm no longer the victim you thought you could leave behind without consequences. Sophie, unable to contain the pain she had been harboring for years, screamed, You left me. You didn't care. I do not have father. Her words were like knives, digging into Adam's heart. No, Sophie, you don't understand, Laura began, looking for a justification. It was all very complicated. We needed a fresh start. And what was I? A memory you decided to erase? Adam interrupted, frustration showing in his voice. He looked into Laura's eyes, which were now full of tears. You can't just try to justify the unjustifiable. Abandoning your family isn't complicated. It's cowardly. Laura, in an effort to regain control of the situation, said, Adam, I did what I did because I thought it was best. For me and Sophie. We didn't want to live in that city, in that place that reminded us of you. And you think I wanted to live with your memories? The pain I felt was horrendous, but I didn't give up. I got back up, Adam replied, his voice echoing with intensity. And now you return, not out of concern, but because of the inheritance. That's what really matters, isn't it? Sophie, still struggling with her grief, began to cry. You didn't care. You left me alone. Sophie's anger was palpable, and her words cut like blades. I didn't want to leave you, but you can't just run away from your responsibilities, Laura, Adam said, turning his gaze to his ex-wife. You have no idea what I went through to get here. I was rescued by strangers who gave me a second chance. And you? You abandoned everything and everyone. I didn't know you were alive. Laura argued, her voice cracking. I thought that I lost you forever. And you haven't thought about how this has affected our daughter? Adam asked, gesturing to Sophie, who was now in a whirlwind of emotions. She had to grow up without a father because of her choices. Laura looked at Sophie, and the desperation became evident on her face. Sophie, I did what I thought was right. Please, you need to understand. Understand what? That you decided I didn't need a father? That you could just start over and leave me behind? Sophie screamed, now hugging her own arms, as if trying to protect herself from the pain. Adam felt his heart sink as he saw his daughter struggling with her emotions. He took a deep breath, knowing he needed to be the voice of reason. Sophie, I'm here now, and despite everything, I love you. No matter what your mother did, I never stopped loving you. Adam's words seemed to hit a nerve in Sophie. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. But why didn't you come back sooner? Why did you let us think you were dead? Because I needed time. Time to heal and rediscover myself. Time to forgive myself. And now, what do you expect? For me to just forget all this and return to the role of victim? I'm not that person anymore, Laura. Silence took over the environment, everyone processing their own emotions. Laura looked at Adam with a mixture of fear and recognition. She realized that she no longer had control over the situation. Their lives had changed irrevocably. Adam was no longer the man she had left for dead. He had become someone with strength and determination, and that left her vulnerable. I don't know what to do right now, Laura finally confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. You need to face the consequences of what you did, Adam replied, his voice softer. And most importantly, you need to be honest with Sophie. I can't be the only one facing the past. Adam's gaze was steady, but there was a spark of compassion. He knew the truth was the only path to healing, not just for him, but for all of them. Laura and Sophie were sitting at a coffee table, tension permeating the air around them. Laura fidgeted nervously with her cup, her thoughts racing a mile a minute. What had they done? The idea of recovering Ethan's inheritance, now Adam, consumed her, but his presence in the city was a constant threat. Sophie, in turn, looked out the window, her eyes lost in memories of the past, in the figure of the father she missed so much. We need a plan, Mom, Sophie finally said, breaking the silence. He won't let us take the inheritance like this. He has changed, and we cannot underestimate him. Laura nodded, her gaze dark. I know. He has become someone strong, but we cannot let that stop us. The inheritance is rightfully ours. We need to think of something that will demoralize him, something that will make him look like the villain. What if he finds out what we're doing? Sophie questioned, worried. He might be smarter than he looks. We need to act quickly. We need proof that he is not the person everyone thinks he is. He was abandoned, but that doesn't change the fact that he's still the father. And that might play to our advantage, Laura said, her mind already scheming. Meanwhile, Adam, who was watching the scene from afar, began to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Laura and Sophie's furtive glances did not go unnoticed. Something was happening, and he wouldn't let them destroy him again. He decided it was time to investigate his intentions. He had to know what they were planning. In the following days, Adam began to pay attention to Laura and Sophie's routine. He noticed that they often met with a local lawyer, talking in whispers. It was clear they were up to something. Adam had a friend who worked at the same firm and decided he needed information. Hey, Mark, Adam began, taking a sip of coffee. Have you heard anything about Laura and Sophie? They are moving in strange circles, and it looks like they are up to something. Mark looked around, before responding in a low voice. Actually, yes. They have been meeting with a lawyer who is known for helping people get inheritances in complicated situations. They speculate that they are trying to delegitimize their position regarding inheritance. Adam felt a wave of anger rise. Was that what they were doing? He would not allow Laura to manipulate the situation once again. With a plan in mind, he decided he needed to expose the truth once and for all. Meanwhile, Laura and Sophie were increasingly anxious. Laura had an appointment with her lawyer to discuss the next steps, and the tension between them was growing. Sophie, noticing her mother's anguish, asked, Mom, do you really think this will work? What if this all blows up in our faces? Don't worry, Sophie. I know what I am doing. Just trust me, Laura replied, her voice strained. Deep down, however, she was also starting to doubt her decisions. Adam, on the other hand, began gathering evidence, talking to people who knew Laura and Sophie. He discovered that Laura was involved in fraudulent activities to secure the inheritance. That was all he needed. With the evidence in hand, he decided to make a public revelation. It would be time to confront Laura in front of everyone, expose her lies and manipulations. While Adam organized his thoughts for the big event, Laura watched from afar. She felt like the plan might be about to fall apart. Adam's determined look made her nervous, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. Anxiety consumed her, but the need to recover her inheritance was stronger. I can't let him win. I need to get ready, thought Laura, as night fell over the city. She knew the battle was just beginning and that Adam was ready to fight. And so, the tension between the three characters increased, leading them to an inevitable confrontation that would change the course of their lives forever. The air was filled with expectation and anxiety at the community event taking place in the city's central square. Colorful banners waved gently in the breeze as residents and friends gathered to celebrate community unity. However, for Adam, it was the moment of truth. He looked around, taking in the familiar faces, many of whom had become friends during his new life. The lively music contrasted with the storm brewing inside him. He knew that the revelation he was about to make would change everything. When he finally took the stage, an uneasy silence took over the crowd. Adam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of each gaze fixed on him. Thank you everyone for being here. Today, I want to share something important about my past that, for too long, has been shrouded in lies and dishonor. He began, his voice firm. For years, I was abandoned by those I loved most. My wife, Laura, and daughter, Sophie, decided I wasn't worth it. They left me for dead after an accident. A murmur went through the crowd, and Adam saw the look of confusion spread. He continued, "But I'm not here to ask for sympathy. I'm here to expose the truth. Not only did Laura abandon me, she also engaged in fraud to secure the inheritance that is rightfully mine." The words echoed with force, and shock took over the faces in front of them. He turned towards Laura, who was standing near the edge of the crowd, pale as a ghost. "Laura, you thought you could go back and continue your life as if nothing had happened. But I am no longer the victim you left behind. I have stood up, and now, with the evidence I have gathered, I cannot allow you to continue deceiving this city." He held up a folder, displaying documents proving Laura's fraudulent transactions. "Here are the records that show how you manipulated the situation to benefit from my tragedy." Laura, in a moment of desperation, tried to intervene. "Adam, this isn't fair. You can't do this to me in front of everyone." Her voice shook, and she moved restlessly, like cornered prey. "I did what I did because I needed to take care of Sophie." "You could have done all of this honestly," Adam replied, his voice ringing steady. "But you chose the low road. You chose to leave me for dead." He pointed to the crowd. "And now, what are you going to do? Try to justify yourself with lies, once again?" The tense atmosphere intensified, and Adam felt a rush of validation as some members of the community began to murmur and point at Laura. "She can't be trusted," someone shouted. The pressure was mounting, and Adam realized that people were beginning to mobilize, realizing the truth. The police, already alerted to the situation, approached. The officers went to Laura and surrounded her. "Laura, you are under arrest for fraud and endangering Adam's life," one of the officers announced, as she looked around desperately, seeking support from familiar faces. But the reaction was clear. The city was on Adam's side. Sophie, who had watched everything from a corner, finally approached. With tears in her eyes, she looked at Adam. "Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know anything." Adam crouched down, holding her shoulders firmly. "I know, honey. It's not your fault. It's time to rebuild our relationship." Laura was handcuffed and taken away, still screaming for justice, but her words no longer had power. Adam turned to Sophie, who was now in his arms, crying. "We'll be fine, I promise." As the crowd began to disperse, Adam felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. He was finally free, and, most importantly, he was ready to move forward alongside Sophie, building a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. They left the square, hand in hand, as new hope shone before them.